Welcome to 5 Good Minutes in the Clubhouse today. Even though it is 5 minutes, we do go a little bit longer, but we have some very special guests and we love to hear them talk about their career. We might change this to past players and past legends, I reckon, over the next couple of weeks. But today's special guest, Martin Leslie, formerly from the Port Adelaide Footy Club, heading up to the Brisbane Bears. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome, Marty. So, traditional Port Adelaide, growing up in the area, Semaphore, Largs Bay, etc.
Yeah, definitely sort of grounded down that way. Born at Semaphore, was born there at the Lefevre Hospital, and then we lived a year at Semaphore, and then we moved a long way away to Largs Bay, and then another long way away to Largs North. So, Mum passed away when I was 16, and my sisters were a bit older, and Dad and I decided to move to Alberton because he was from Rosewater, which is next door. So, so pretty much lived and breathed down there, guys. For the first 20-odd years.
Port Adelaide heartland out there, that's for sure.
You could have nearly walked with each move, not having to worry about driving each move, Marty.
Well, he would have sort of whacked them on all our stuff in a shopping trolley and, down the road.
Well, you're lucky at Port Adelaide it didn't get pinched. Come on.
Yeah. Mate, where did you play your junior footy? Obviously in that area, but which was your home club?
I 7 years old, I started playing football for Taparoo, which were based at the North Haven Oval now. That's right. You guys know that. Mm-hmm. So Taparoo used to have that ground, and I used to live probably half a K away from there, if that, in between that oval and probably Fort Largs Police Academy. So I was down there at 7 years old, and I promise you, 7 years old playing in under 11s, went down there. Taparoo at the time had 4 teams in one grade under 11s. So Port Adelaide at the time, there was about 14 teams in the comp for, say, under 11s, and Taparoo had 4 of them, which was unbelievable. I didn't really take much notice at the time, but looking back was crazy. There were so many kids down that way.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, well, at least you didn't have to travel far to play.
No, I didn't, unless we played at Ingle Farm or Paraka, because we used to play against them guys back in those days. And I reckon I got 2 kicks in the first year I played. And I promise you that's, I remember going off the ground and saying I got a kick and thinking I was pretty happy and that's the truth because the kids were 3 years older, maybe 4 years older, and it just pushed me out the way.
Oh, that's a huge difference at that as a little kid then,
Yeah, so I ended up only playing 1 year then, and my next door neighbour wanted to go to Ethelston, and so I thought, well, I can't get a kick at Taparoo. I might have another go there. So went to Ethel in 1971 when I was about 8. So I'm born late in the year, and I ended up sort of, after a couple of years, won a couple of association awards out there, and my rivals were Bruce Abernathy, who played for Wingfield, then Rosewater, and Rossi Aegis, and a few of those guys. So Rossi played for Rosies, and I reckon Bruce was playing for Wingfield, then went to Rosewater. So yeah, we basically grew up together, played against Tony Antrobus, David Robertson, who were both Ingle Farm. So we're all the sort of same era. So it was great memories, really. It was fantastic back in those days. There were so many teams to play against, and if you look for those sides now, the Mount Carmels were there. That was part of Rosewater, but they were a team. And Semaphore Park, they're no longer. Ethelston, my old team, no longer. There's obviously as the demographics change of population, probably about half of those teams are not around anymore, or even more, I'd say.
And so from your junior days, progressing obviously to Port Adelaide, 17s, 19s, and then making your league debut in 81?
Yeah.
Memories of your league debut?
not great. I was basically taught, if I'm playing backlines, and Dad used to say this to me, like, well, if he doesn't get a kick, son, and you only get one or whatever, you've done your job. So I was a little bit of a stickler to that when I was younger. My first A-grade game was against Westies at Richmond Oval, and I stood, being the Butchie, Greg Phillips, being centre half back, Tony Giles on the flank, maybe a Peter Hoffner on the other side, Ivan Eckerman, Trevor Sorrell, I reckon, was full back then. I stood Dirk de Jong and Dexter Kennedy.
You're giving away a bit of height there.
Yeah, well, Dexter was pretty cool, mate, because he's a mate amongst. He played with Port Adelaide, and yeah, he looked after me, mate. He was
good bloke, Dexter, pretty laid back.
Lovely man. So probably only troubled the scoreboard for touches about 6 or 7 times that day, but I just learned a lot from the guys I played with. Especially Greg Phillips. Just watched him because I ended up being a centre half back myself for a while, but just sort of watched how he read the play. Greg Phillips was a great reader of the play. He could work out that he'd always stand his man, like he'd sometimes be 5 or 10 metres away from his man. And I'm going, how come he keeps on getting the ball all the time? He was a very good reader of the play. Tony Giles was exceptional, sort of hard man, straight at it. Not a lot of skill, but straight through. Ivan Eckerman, very much the same. And obviously playing with Russell Ebert and Brian Cunningham and being coached by John Cale. For the 3 people I've just said, if you want to look to people who, you want to learn off, pretty much just by watching them, watching what they do, was just a great learning experience.
Greg
I never
Phillips.
really had to ask a lot of questions, guys. I didn't really have to ask too many questions. What do I do here? I used to just watch people, and the way, say, Russell and Brian, Bucky, who were playing at the time, the way they looked after their injuries, the way they did this and that, and the professionalism just off the field in the training track, like having ice and doing the right thing, and then John Cale, the way he coached and how professional they were. So it didn't realise it at the time, but looking back, it was like it was like going to school, like the footy school, really. So, great memories.
Some of the absolute greats, like Greg Phillips. Greg Phillips is the best reader of a ball I've seen. He's my best ever centre half back. And look, Bucky Cunningham, totally unique. He's the only player in footy history where he'd kick for goal, depending on which foot, on where he was on the ground. No one's ever done that since as a set shot. He was a freak. There's people out there just don't realise he's one of the all-time greats as well.
What an apprenticeship!
You're dead right. When you play with Bucky, he was he was my teacher at Taparoo High for a couple of years.
Yes.
Well, all the girls used to pervert his bum. All the 14-year-old girls. All they do, they didn't learn a thing. They used to pervert his bum. Yeah, so I didn't really understand that at the time, but they thought it was all right. But Bucky, just a lovely guy, a gentleman, and it was as courageous as they came. So it was just again. Say those 3 names, 4: Greg Phillips, John Cale, Bucky Cunningham, Russell Ebert. It's pretty easy to learn off. And I know Malcolm at Norwood had, their John Wynns and Gary McIntoshes, and I don't worry, I respect those guys as well immensely. And so we're all very lucky.
Great era of footy. Now, so you played 4 games in 81. 82 established yourself and had a pretty unfortunate end of the year. And let's be honest, I will say as a Nord supporter, Greg Turnbull, 82 second semi, nowadays would have probably got 6 to 8 games. Back then, nothing. Go through that memories of that day, mate.
Yeah. I thought about that the other day, Matt, when you brought that up, because before I had a broken sesamoid bone. I had it that year, and also I got another one the next year. So I don't know if you noticed, I only played 2 games in 1983.
Yep.
Sesamoid bones is pretty much the bone that's about 2 inches below your big toe, or an inch below your big toe. And so before the match of '82, I had a couple of needles in the sesamoid bone just to deaden the foot, and because it was, I don't know, it's when you've got a broken bone in your foot, it's just a bit of a struggle. I'm not having a whinge here at all. To be honest, I should never have played, but I ended up, remember having the needle in my foot, I couldn't feel it in the first quarter. So when you're actually running and you can't feel your foot, it was ridiculous, to be honest. And I look back and I'm sort of half, in a way, I'm so glad I got knocked out. I'm knocked over by Greg Turnbull just to get me off the field, because I really felt, very ordinary and thinking, hell, what am I doing out here? And so it wasn't the second semi wasn't a great one, because I ended up at 3/4 time. I listened to the end of the game in hospital at Queen Elizabeth, and because Greg caved me cheekbone in.
Yes.
And so what they did, they actually cut my cheek to try and pull it out, but they couldn't pull my cheekbone out. They end up going up through my mouth and pushing it out from the inside. So, as I said to Malcolm the other day, and admired Greg Turnbull. Don't worry, I admire the Warriors, and he was one of those. But he was a bit cheeky the next time he saw me about a year or so later, and looked up at me, and because he was only 5'10" or whatever Greg was, and he was a bit cheeky, and I've gone, okay.
6 weeks, I think that might be a bit light these days.
Yeah. Well, I remember actually watching it on the channel or whatever it was, the news on a Monday night, and I've just gone, wow, now I've seen it. Yeah, so you remember it, and anyway, that was football those days, and none of us were angels, and, I still treat, my foes in those days as good people. I treat people the way I'd like to be treated. When it came to football, though, maybe different.
We will get onto the famous. We will get onto the famous Victorian one in a minute. Let's go through. Look, 1984. It is one of the all-time great grand finals, but I will be honest. Nord were, and I know Neville was pleasantly surprised when you weren't his opponent that day. Thoughts with that? I get it. Let's stick to your original side. You're the dominant centre half back, etc. But not lining up on Nord's key player when you were their Port's best defender that day. Thoughts there, mate?
It's a hard one, because I'm starting to think, because I played centre half back all year that year. I don't think I'd moved from centre half back one time in that year, if I remember. And all of a sudden in a grand final, you'd go to, you'd mess up your team. Surely sometimes you'd think that, Neville Roberts, an absolute star. Jim Michael wasn't a bad player either, mind you.
Piano was a very good player.
Yep.
His son becomes an AFL player in a week's time. So,
yeah. And who's got him?
Probably the Crows.
Yeah, he'll be a father's son. He qualifies. Jim qualifies for his Nord games by 3 games for him to be a father-son selection. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah. So I'll tell you a little funny story there. I could just start darting off. I used to, I'm not an arborist anymore. I still am, but I'm not in that game. And I was up at Sajuna School doing an arborist report. And had to have a chat to the headmaster there, and it was Jim Michael.
Yes.
So I hadn't seen him since, basically, because he probably retired around that time. Would that be right? Mid-80s?
Yes,
I think.
Yeah, mid-80s, yeah. His last game was at the reserves premiership side. I think it was 80. It's either 85 or 86. I think it was 86. But yes, yep.
Yeah. So I remember sort of just touching base in the office there at the school, and I've had to do a report on their trees for safety and for fire and all that sort of thing. And so I ended up sort of Jim come out, and I said, Jim, Martin Leslie. He said, oh, how you going, Martin? And very decent chap, as most of us are when we're off the field. And his assistant, his deputy, was coming along with us, and I said to her, and I can't remember her name now, I said, you know what? In a grand final, your headmaster squeezed me by the nuts. And he said, Jim, you didn't. And we had a bit of a to do there, because he actually gave me a good squeeze, and I gave him a little bit of a clip, and that was really funny. That the interaction between her and him. You did not, Jim. Surely.
Don't worry, that's stored in the memory bank when I next speak to Jim, mate. Yes.
Yeah, no, we'll do that. Pass that one on when you see him, because I did bring that up. And but no, Jim was a good player. Yeah, I don't look back as that was a bad decision. I think what we did probably there in that grand final was, and Maxie James was a great footballer of the 70s. He played his first game of the year of A grade in the grand final. That wasn't fantastic, in my opinion. And we had, I don't know. Benny Harris was our fullback, and he done his ankle in the second semi. Yeah, but one other thing I think that we heard as well, I think that was pretty well done by Barmy, is he came out with a little bit of oof and boof, and we retaliated. And it's always the ones who retaliate. So it was a fairly clever start with the Tim Evans and Craig Marm, all that sort of stuff going on. And I thought that we were always confident, and obviously Nord were as well, to win the game. But I just thought, looking back, there was a lot of things that we did when it came to a bit of retaliation, that we, instead of actually just, hitting the ball and not worrying about the man, that we probably could have learned a bit about.
Yeah, there was no doubt Nord did suck. And, that was the late Ian Stasnowski's idea. It was him and Greg Nicholson came up with that idea for Tim, and, it worked. And, we sacked Dwayne Russell in a couple of times, and, it was very much a case of the retaliators got caught, and,
And I think also one of the last times that teams lined up in positions rather than
that was
across the green.
Time.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
Yeah, what for the that's right, for the
national anthem. Yep.
Yes. Yeah,
Mate.
that's correct. Yeah. No, sorry, I just Miguel's just walked out. She's just having a bit of a chat, and I said, "Oh well, you've had too much of a chat tonight. You can, was back in there."
Mate, moving along, 1986, mate, you win the John Cale medal. Or Port's Best and Fairest. Sorry, Port's Best and Fairest?
Yeah, the Bob McLean, actually.
Bob McLean. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, no, and Greg Anderson still thinks that I ripped him off. So, you can talk to Greg about that and just say, do you reckon you should have won the 86? Well, he won the McGarry, so... And but I actually was up in Darwin playing football at the time, because I just wanted to, just to get away, have your holiday, and then probably try and stay fit at the same time. Not that well, it's funny. I went to Darwin. I reckon I drank bloody 12 beers every day at least, and then it came back 4 kilos lighter. So I came back in the like at the end of 80s. Yeah, end of 87, I was as fit as hell, because you go from Darwin where the air's so thick and you sweat so much, and we did do a little bit of training up there. And came back and everyone said, "You've just been off on a training camp." I said, "Well, yeah, okay, I've been off on a training camp." But it was a really good trip, and I was up there when they rang me. And said that I won the vote, on the last vote of the night. So I still, when it comes up, I still say to Ando, "Yeah, just bad luck about that, isn't it, old boy?"
Nothing wrong with that. Let's go to the night. Let's go to the night where you became the hero of South Australia. Go for that game, mate. G'day, Doomy.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's been, everyone, to be honest, like always says, oh, I remember you with, Derek Burton, and and I just, yeah, well, that's sort of nice to be remembered for something, but sometimes you just go, well, I did play, a few games as well, but the whole thing about playing for Portland and about playing for South Australia was about you playing for your, when you're playing for your club,
Yep.
you're playing for your mates and you're playing for the supporters. So a lot of people people don't sort of say that too much. I used to play for my supporters because, you know what, I used to mix with them a lot.
The good old days, mate.
The
Yeah, exactly. The good old days.
Yeah, we're really missing that these days, aren't we? Yep.
Yeah. So I know Gary McIntosh had, quite a few beers back in the day with, and just a sort of guy that I'd love to play football with.
Yep.
Every time I played. But he's the sort of guy who's the same. He's the same. He's, I used to play for the people who rolled up. And so that was it. When you're playing for your state, well then, and she's on, well then she's on. And the thing is that if someone's going to, have a crack, well, you're playing centre half back, so you're a pillar of defence. What are you going to do? Roll over, or are you going to have a crack? And so that's what I did, but I did it for my team, and I did it for my mates, and I did it for the supporters, and I did it for South Australia. And if you got that sort of going with you, surely that's enough.
Oh, look, I think it was great. I think Dermot Brereton, he just thought he was going to intimidate this guy, and this guy won't do anything. And you've given him back more than what he got, and I thought it was great that it put him back in his spot, exactly where he should have been.
Yeah, and I was lauded for all that and all that sort of stuff. But I remember one of my teammates, and I won't say his name, I don't disrespect this guy, but his name won't come up, and he said, "Oh, geez, I'm glad you did that because I wouldn't have done that." I've just gone, "Yeah, well, I'm glad I fucking stood him then." Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yep.
That's because I would have liked, if you put your body on the line, all you're asking is the other 17 or 18 blokes that's on the team do the same. Isn't that all you ask for?
Oh, couldn't agree more.
Yep.
It's playing for the correct reason, not the dollar, playing for the correct reason. Look, money.
Yeah, well, the dollar wasn't so good at the time, so it didn't really.
A few drinks at the end of the game, and that's about it.
Matty, I do want to ask you about a famous game. Look, obviously a game which a lot of different emotions, etc. But look, and then how Port Adelaide handled it immediately, how Foss and Jack handled it immediately afterwards, and all that side. Jack handled it to go to Foss's, but the Anthony Williams game. Your memories
okay,
there.
Okay, my memory of that. All right, you want my memory of the Anthony Williams game? So Anthony is one of the nicest people I ever met. So what happened back that was in 1988. Okay. So back in the early 1980s, late 70s, early 1980s, I grew up and played a lot of junior football with Stephen, especially. Yep. And then played I played 30 B grade games, 30, 40, I can't remember now, to try and break into that team of the the early 80s at Port Adelaide. It won 3 in a row. And spent a lot of time with Anthony and a lot of time with Stephen. And we used to go up to Murray River and do a lot of skiing together. Anthony was the sort of guy that if you ever had a problem, he said, just give me a call. Not that I, needed to too much, but he was great with working on people's cars and that sort of stuff. I was living in Woodville, living in the same street at the time as same street as David Granger, because I was looking after my sister's house at Windsor Avenue, Woodville, for a year because they were running a deli. And it was my last year in Adelaide. And David was a mate of mine. David was a, misunderstood sort of person. But anyway, we won't go there. But I was down the Arndale shopping centre, and it was about lunchtime on a Friday, the day before the Norwood game. And I heard on the radio, because they had the news on, and I was just doing my shopping at Arndale. And I heard that the guy had been squashed by the brick wall at Glenelg South or whatever it was, and I've redoing his house, and I've just gone, and I've just as a flash, and I just thought, nah, couldn't have been. So anyway, I went home and got a message. It was a message on my phone, which is the old days. You had to press the button to listen to the message.
The answering machine, yeah.
Yeah. And it was, my partner, and she said, Anthony's gone. I'm just going, wow. Do you know what? I reckon that day against Norwood, I had a pretty good year at Adelaide. As far as I remember, I think, they was, which was unusual for me because I used to give the umpires a fair bit of cracking on the field, but I was in the top 5 or 6 that they thought would win the Brownlow, and I knew I had no chance because I used to give the umpires a fair bit of crack. And, but the good part in those days, they used to give it back to me and, and carry on, play on.
Yep.
So that night, I didn't sleep. I just thought, I just didn't sleep. I went to the Norwood game and, again, thought I was ready. I had an ordinary one. I stood Craig Kelly.
Yeah.
I reckon we used to swap. I used to play centre half back. This day I played centre half forward, but I was pretty ordinary. I reckon I'm just guessing. Not too many touches. Craig was a good player, and I'd probably be way better off playing centre half back, and he was centre half forward. But anyway, I was fairly ordinary. But we all went back to the Williams house that night, and. I've got to say, it was a bit of a dream. It's something that you just go, some guys, George Fouch, who made his career out of that game.
Yes, it changed his whole career, very much so. Late inclusion and was probably best on ground, and in a back started off the whole, him and Delaney, the combination from that day, which is quite incredible.
Yeah.
Batman and
that is true, and that was in '88, and George grew so much. He was playing in '87 as well. He played in the final or two in '87, and George, I've often said, we'll go. Sorry about leaving Anthony, but one of the loveliest men you'd ever meet in your life. Yeah. But George, George was the sort of guy that. You admired the way he played. Sometimes I call him the biggest player in the arse of all time. I mean, but the good part about George, he would, I'm only saying that to stir him if he ever hears this, but every time I took a mark, because I'd rather, if you take a mark in the back lines, because it's just come your way, give it off and let a runner go with it, because that's what the opposition don't want. So George was always there every time. So he was, I think in the '88 grand final when we beat the Bays, I reckon I, slipped it off to him, 3 or 4 times because he was always there. And if rather than me going back and taking my time and wondering who am I going to kick it to, he's straight there and bang, away you go and get it right back at him. Do you know what I'm saying?
So of course you were all Australian in 1988 as well. Yep. So and a premiership year. So great memories there, mate.
Yeah, all good. I just needed to go. I think you admire Macca for just being the Norwood man. And the thing is, because I'm sure Macca's a bit the same. I haven't spoken to him for a fair while, but I know next time he would be exactly the same. I just needed to. I'd lived in the Port. I played for Port. I worked in the Port, if you know what I'm saying. I needed to sort of to try something different. And the main reason I left, and look, the last year I had premiership All Australian, but I needed to go and play against the best players every week. That's the only reason I left. I would have done way better financially if I stayed in Adelaide, because I had a lot of contacts who wanted to set me up in business and, bottle shops and, I had a lot of people, but the thing is I just needed to go and play against the best players. And apparently, like Graham Corns wrote in the paper, he should have gone to a better team. Well, I didn't have any choice. So I got drafted.
Exactly.
And if I waited another year, guys, I was going to the end of my tether, because I was 26 when I played my first game over there. And every week, especially in the second year, because I missed maybe 8 or 9 with my shoulder in the first year, but every week I was playing against a bloke that I'm going, here we go. There was a time there, and I just said to me, Mrs. Anais, and she didn't really give a stuff about footy too much. She supported me, but she wasn't really a football sort of girl.
Yep.
I said to her, do you know, in the last 6 weeks I've stood Gary Ablett senior, because I went to the halfback flank to stand him. I said Dermot Brereton. It was Terry Danaher, I thought was an absolute star. Buddy Stephen Kernahan, Stuart Lowe, they just and Wayne Carey, because he was playing them days, and that's 6 weeks in a row. And as I used to say, you didn't need an alarm clock to wake up on a Saturday morning. You just go bing, here we go. But that was the reason I went away. And I know I played for a lowly side there for a while. But you pick yourself against the best, and that was what I wanted to do. But you know what? Geez, I missed Port Adelaide when I was up there. Yeah. I really did, because they're all my mates and stuff. But I just thought, oh well, you've got an opportunity to play against the best players in the land.
Absolutely.
Every week, and that's why I left. So yeah, but no regrets, fellas, no regrets.
Absolutely. So between 1981 and 88, you play 150 games for Port Adelaide. You captained them in a premiership in 88 with a bit of a star-studded lineup. I'm just looking at the team right now. You move up to Brisbane. You go from a traditional club in Port Adelaide where it's very tight-knit, everybody's sort of on the same page, to a new venture up into Brisbane with not a lot of history behind it. Just explain what that was like.
Couldn't have been any more different. Like, there's so many things I could say about that. Just say that the trainers, even though there was a couple of them that knew their football, but some trainers had no idea. When you go to a football club, like, I'm not saying they had no idea how to train, but they had no idea about football, because they had to drag these people in. And, when you're laying on the couch or on the bench getting a massage, and the guys will be telling you. And I had Ted McMahon at Port Adelaide. He was still there in the 40s. Ted McMahon's a legend of Port Adelaide. He was, a trainer in the 40s, and he was still the trainer in the early 80s. So the stories those people can tell you, and about the ghosts in the room and who's around you and that sort of stuff was fantastic. So totally different. Up there, new team, change rooms were ordinary. Sort of a bunch of players. A lot of them are still friends of mine today. Probably only 3 or 4 I stay in touch with, but a lot of guys up there as well who were on there probably the last couple of years of football, and saw an opportunity to make some reasonable sort of money, and maybe didn't put in what you would have liked as a teammate. It's no names there as well, but it was a very different situation. I remember going to a game in 1990, and we still had rodeos next door to Carrara. And
wow.
as rodeos and unbelievable. Where I'd sort of get to the game, and there was just fairy floss and donuts smell instead of pies and beer. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, it was so different. Ran out the game against Collingwood in 1990. There was 20,000 people there, and I reckon we had 2,500 supporters to their 17.5. Yeah. So it was a lot different, but times changed. When we got to the Gabba up in Brisbane, things were a little bit different. And, then all of a sudden, recruiting was a bit different. We started to get some players such as Chris Scotts and Craig McRae's, Nigel Lappin's, this sort of thing. Where back in the day, we basically had 60 on our list, and they used to drag in these kids from country Melbourne. And the poor buggers, there were 7 of them living in a house on the Gold Coast. And they're only making $7,000 a year at the time, and their rent was paid, but they were eating baked beans on toast every day.
Wow. How times have changed.
Oh, you go back and ask that question. These guys were getting paid nothing and expected to perform. And it was just a real, I was obviously in a luckier situation. But I didn't realise that until I asked some questions. And so, times did change. And so, we were called the Humphrey B Bears. Sometimes we called ourselves that. But at the end of the day, every time you go out and play, because you might get a busted up body for playing, you got to play for your mates. You just got to play for your mates, and that's what we did. I've got some really good friends from that era: Johnny Gastev, Mark Zanotti, and David O'Keefe. There's a lot of some guys I admired. A lot of guys. Roger Merritt. They're really sad that he had a stroke up there, and it was really disappointing. But there's a lot of good people go through. It was just the time, We had Christopher Scapes as our boss, and we know what happened there.
Yep.
But things have got to start from somewhere, don't they?
Yep. Absolutely. So as you mentioned previously, you were the number 1 draft pick in 86, but you didn't get to play your first game until 1989. Bit of a baptism of fire at St Kilda down at Moorabbin.
Yeah, I remember some guy sent me a text. He said, "Oh, look, I kicked 10 on you." I said, "Well, yeah, no, I didn't. That's rumour." No, he kicked 6 up to me to 3/4 time, but they also kicked 24 to get for the game. And he kicked 9 for the game. I got moved at 3/4 time, and they tried to put me somewhere else. But let me tell you, when it's coming down that many times, he kicked 130 odd that year. And I remember hearing that some of the Bears hierarchy were going, well, you wait till, because it's very Victorian, South Australian back in those days, because as it probably still is. And I can guarantee you, look this up. I heard through a couple of good trainers, they overheard some guys going, wait till buddy Silvani stands him next week, because they played Carlton the next week. And wait till he stands him, and then, we'll see who the best, well, I wasn't a fullback anyway. I was in the fullback's bumhole. But Silvani got 12 goals, 7 kicked on him by Lockett. And so, but when I heard that about, some of my own, guys at the club, not my teammates, but I've just gone, really? Okay. If St Kilda's going to kick 24 in those days, you reckon Lockett's going to kick a few?
They're going to go through him a few times.
Absolutely.
You played under a few coaches there, Marty?
Yeah, I did. It was very weird. Peter Knight's lovely guy. Really, really hard coach in the ways of the training and stuff. Probably compare him to John Cale, who got you fit, and he was more of a more of a horse trainer sort of style coach. Sometimes hear you get off the field because you look good, and you'd go, no, I want to stay on as you know, get off. And Peter Knights was he was pretty brutal. We trained for 3 hours and do a lot of one-on-one, and you'd be really knackered and have a lot of bloody cork thighs, and even from training. So Robbie Walls is very similar. Very, very clued up coach. But Jesus, I think I was probably my second half of my career up there. So just trying to stay in the park at training sometimes. We had more injuries at training than we did in the game. I think he was just trying to harden us up. But I'm thinking, no, I'm hard enough at the moment. I don't need to, go through too much at training. I'd rather save it for the weekend. I don't mind doing the miles, but not the heavy clashes at training. But we did. But as I said, it had to start from somewhere, and that's where they started from. And
Normie Dare with a South Australian link there, West Torrens as well, mate.
Yeah, Normie was a good guy. It was best and fairest of the year that Normie coached.
Yep.
Just a good guy. He's. I don't think he wanted to be the coach, to be honest. I think he was more suited to an assistant coach. But all those guys, they were good guys. All the coaches that I had there. Peter Feltham took over from.
Paul Feltham. Yep.
Sorry, Paul Feltham took over from Knightsy, and we won 5 out of 7 games. He coached for 7 games. We won 5 of them. Yeah. So, but he got sacked.
Pretty unlucky not to get the gig after that.
Yeah.
I would have thought so. But it was politics in footy, guys. Politics in footy. That's what happens. And I knew he was going to get the sack beforehand because someone told me. They said, "What do you think of him?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know him that well personally, but we just won 5 out of 7 games, and this was a teammate of mine at the time who was a bit older than me. It had a bit of influence, and he said, "Yeah, well, I don't like him." So, and I'm retiring in about a month. I don't know that, but he's going to be gone before I do, before I am. So I'm going, yeah, okay. So that's what happens. I was there for football, not for the other bullshit.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And mate, in 1990, you win the Brisbane club champion.
Yeah.
Winning it at 2 different clubs. Just explain how that feels.
Yeah, it feels it probably feels like good, when you get it, and like as all of us do, we have our we have our moments where we achieve a few things, and if you want to just hang on to that medal for the rest of your life and just or move on and try and achieve something else, that's the whole thing about it, really. It's it's good, and it's good to look back on. But it's like, oh well, I've got some bruises and a bit of blood, out of winning it. So, okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it, and love the teammates and who supported me and stuff, and sort of move on.
Yep.
And
you pitted yourself against the best as well. So that's a feather in the cap for sure.
Yeah. I don't get me wrong. I don't. I'm not playing it, stuff down. It's just stuff. This is a little bit unusual. I don't sort of rave on about myself too much, and I was just seriously happy to play football. Very, very a lot of gratitude to play football in that era. Like just coming back and being in Brisbane and coming back to playing for some state sides with the likes of the Michael Ashers and the Gary McIntoshes and the Mark Naileys and the Craig Bradleys and the Stephen Kernaghan's and the Tony Halls and the Greg Phillipses and the Russell Johnsons. That was, for me, again, talking about state footy, don't worry about Dermy, just playing with the guys that I played with. We look at their side and you go, that's going to be tough to beat. And we beat them quite a few times.
We had a great record there for a while. Now, I did get a message at one stage, Chris Brown from the Nord History Committee, and I am actually thanking you on behalf of the Nord History Committee, but a message and contact you. Now, let's go for it. You just explain it completely, your link with not only the Nord Footy Club, but actually virtually the origin of football, right back to the beginning of footy in South Australia. Go, Marty.
Yeah, okay. Well, Topsy Waldron. Well, when I was younger, I heard the name, and it was sort of, my grandfather, who was his grandson, lived with us after his wife died. My grandma lived with us in the 1970s, and before he passed away, he lived with us for about 6 or 7 years. So his name was Norm. His actual name at the time was Norm Wilkins, because he changed his name, and we are thinking, and it's all, he is his grandson. And my sister's gone through all of it. She did 15 years of the family tree, but he changed his name to Wilkins because I think the pressure on my grandfather was probably a little bit over the top, because I think I think Topsy Waldron was, like an icon figure at the time. My grandfather was born in 1902, and I'm not too sure if he was willing to maybe hold the mantle, or because my grandfather's son, which is my uncle, he was nicknamed Topsy because of the bloodlines, you see, and so my uncle Norm played one game for Port, and my grandfather Norm, he played 11 for Port Adelaide. So Topsy's my grandfather's grandfather. Yeah. So my sister's got it all, there. And if you looked at my grandfather, and if you looked at Topsy, you can tell. We're not hanging on to anything there. It's just my sister, she did all the stuff. My sister spent 15 years doing a family tree, and it was unbelievable. I've got a book of my mother's side and my father's side, and it's a big folder of about 3 inches thick, and she's done all this. I just could not believe it, that she's given me one and my other sister one to pass on to our kids. So my sister Patricia, Pat, she's done a massive job. But no, Topsy Waldron, he was my great-great-grandfather.
Oh, and he's a legendary figure. His record, if you look through, was considered in some circles the player of the colonial, best player in the colonial back then, is what got called. And his record is quite incredible.
Yeah, it is. And it's a long time before my time, and it's just nice to be part of the old Northern history as well, because Northern's a team that I always admired and respected as well.
Oh, we think we should have got you under the great grandfather, whatever you want to call it, rule, mate.
Yeah. I think my mum would have torn strips off me if I went that way. Yeah.
Mate, obviously some fantastic state of origin teams as well. I'm just having a little bit of a look over the some of the teams, and playing with the Kernahans and the McGuinnesses and the Tony Halls, and mate, it's just a golden era of SA footy, and to be part of it would have just been amazing.
Yeah, no, it was, and also every time you rolled up and you're playing Glenelg, and I'm standing Kernahan, which I did most of the time, and you've got Tony Hall, who I stood once Kernahan left. You've got Tony McGuinness and Chris McDermott, and they had, every team had some really good footballers, and so to come back and play with them all at the same time was it was just a pleasure, really. I remember I'd already played a few state games. I'd gone back to Brisbane, and to be honest, we had, we probably didn't have a really good full side. We probably had 12, 13, maybe players who were good enough to play AFL or VFL at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then you come back to South Australia and you train for State of Origin. The ball wouldn't touch the ground.
Yeah.
The ball just didn't touch the ground. And then you go, how much fun's this? Where when you go back to your AFL team and, where it was, a fair bit different. So, no, it was just a pleasure. It was just a pleasure. You go out, look around the ground before the balls bounce, and you've got absolute stars on the Victorian side, and you've got absolute stars in your team. So you're going, okay, here we go, bounce the ball, let's see what happens. And it was good fun. That's what I try to say to young kids, when I was coaching them, or some A-grade countrysides where I've coached, like just be wanting to play against the best. Like that's the whole thing. It's just like, if you're, I'm really nervous. Oh, great, because if you're not, it means nothing to you.
So what have your footy involvements been, or since you've finished up your career, mate?
Pretty much country stuff. Mainly when I retired from Brisbane, I was cooked, sort of physically and mentally. Physically, my back was gone, so I had an operation on my back. I only played 4 games in my last year. I had 4 epidurals in my back in the last year I played, just to try and keep me on the park, but that didn't really cut the mustard. So I had 2 prolapse discs, which I had operated on a couple of years after I retired. So I was just away from footy, and I suppose living in Brisbane, it was pretty easy to do. It was just easy to be away. I'd probably pop out to training every now and then, see a couple of teammates, and just bob in and bob out. But I was sort of over it.
Yep.
I was over it. So I just went to work for Qantas in the cargo area up there in Brisbane, and it was normal, just dad. I had a couple of young kids under 5 years old, and just a dad. And I didn't really. I remember a couple of times they got me on the radio, to commentate a couple of games, and I think I maybe made out pretty well, but I wasn't watching much football. I was commentating Hawthorn in the. When was that? Late 90s, when they weren't that flash, and I probably didn't know half the bloody players out there. So I wasn't taking a lot of notice, of footy at the time. And it was a nice break when I came back to South Australia, and I started coaching the Barossa, coached Newry for a couple of years in the Barossa there. And then marriage split up, so I ended up coming over to Port Lincoln to follow my kids and be close to my kids. So I coached a couple of country, like up in near Cummins Way, team like for a couple of years, and a couple of years at Boston's in Port Lincoln, and then after that, probably 10 years of juniors. Just the 15s and 17s and that sort of stuff. So. So I've sort of, that finished about 2 or 3 years ago, and so I still do a little bit of sprint training and coordination, which I learned from Billy Noonan. I don't know if you know know Billy.
Yes. Famous fitness person. Yep.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of sprint training with Billy, and he taught me so much in a small amount of time. So I used that because I was, obviously never that fast, but I became adequate through Bill, and so I teach that to young kids, when they need it as well. You do a 1-on-1 or a group of 6 or something like that. But a bit low, pretty low key. Don't need too much to, don't need much headlines. Luckily enough, I had a bit in my time. Had me 15 minutes of fame.
Mate, absolute fantastic to hear from you tonight, mate. We've covered a whole range of topics today, but mate, we could have gone on forever there. That's some fantastic insight not only into your career, but obviously since finishing up as well. Mate, thank you very much for your time tonight, and we look forward to catching up with you at some stage.
Greatly appreciate it, matey.
Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks, Peter. No, it's been good. Thanks for having me on. Fantastic.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers, boys.